This is CBN News Watch.
It is Monday, July 20th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, more violence in Portland, Oregon after 2 straight months of unrest. Protesters attacking buildings, but local officials asking federal agents to leave. A pastor in Virginia attacked with a knife as he's leading Bible study in church, and the county police chief among those coming to his aid. Revival in Georgia as thousands have been gathering for weeks in a small town, and many are giving their lives to Christ. And a most unusual way to watch a film during the age of the coronavirus. We're going to show you how movie organizers in Paris came up with a creative solution to let people come together to see a film safely. All those stories and more are ahead in this edition of CBN News Watch. I want to begin this half hour with the ongoing unrest in Portland, Oregon. The head of the police union there is accusing city leaders of allowing the city to be destroyed as violent protests are now in their seventh week. Dale Hurt is on the story.
2 straight months of rioting in Portland, but judging from his comments to the media, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler's chief concern is not the destruction of his city, but the presence of federal officers in Portland trying to stop the chaos. Portland police declared a riot Saturday night after hundreds of demonstrators broke into the Portland Police Association building and set it on fire. Protesters were chanting, "Every city, every town, burn the precincts to the ground." But with increasing violence and damage now in the millions, what Portland's mayor wants is for federal law enforcement officers who are in the city to protect federal property to go away. He's accusing them of violating protesters' civil rights.
Leave. Your presence here isn't wanted. It's not needed. Unmarked vehicles driving into crowds, pulling people off the streets without any probable cause, as far as I can tell. And the people who are engaging in those activities aren't even willing to identify who they are, and they don't wear insignia on their uniforms. That's a real threat to democracy.
In a tweet, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the federal officers stormtroopers. But on Fox News Sunday, President Trump defended federal involvement.
If you look at what's gone on in Portland, those are anarchists, and we've taken a very tough stand. If we didn't take a stand in Portland, we've arrested many of these leaders. If we didn't take that stand, right now you would have a problem like, they were going to lose Portland.
There were also continuing violent protests in Seattle and Chicago, where Black Lives Matter protesters pelted police with projectiles. Former 60s radical David Horowitz accuses Democratic leaders of helping what he calls terrorists.
Why is half the country torn up? Because Democrats are aiding and abetting terrorists. What else can you call these people in the streets destroying everything, beating up people? They're terrorists, and the Democrat Party is in bed with them.
And the head of Portland's police union accuses city leaders of condoning the chaos.
This is no longer about George Floyd. This is no longer about racial equity. This is about violence, rioting, destruction.
But incredibly, Oregon's Attorney General is seeking a court order to stop federal agents from arresting rioters in Portland. And 3 House Democratic chairs are calling for an investigation of federal involvement. Dale Hurt, CBN News.
A pastor was attacked and a police chief injured during a Bible study Saturday at Grace Covenant Church in Chantilly, Virginia. The Fairfax County Police Chief, Ed Rossler, and another church member came to the pastor's defense after the suspect stabbed the pastor leading the group. Church member Catherine McGuire was grateful that the police chief intervened.
He did his part in the moment. Sometimes we can't prevent injury. I know people were injured, but it could have been worse, I do believe. I think it could have been a lot worse.
The pastor and another church member were taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Another pastor at the church said in a statement, "We are in prayer for all the injured. We are grateful for the courage exhibited that prevented worse from happening." President Trump says he has to see whether or not he'll accept the results of this year's presidential election. The president making his comments in his interview with Chris Wallace of Fox News airing Sunday.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
Joe Biden's campaign responded by saying the American people will decide the election. But the president's statement aside, there are growing concerns about whether many states and cities can handle the expected flood of mail-in ballots because of the coronavirus outbreak. The New York Times reports more than 3 weeks after the state's primaries, officials still have not counted an unknown number of mail-in absentee ballots. So the outcome of multiple races still unknown. The Times pointed out in one key race, only 800 out of 65,000 absentee ballots had been counted as of last Wednesday. One election official told the paper the delays could happen again in November if local boards aren't given more resources. Both Democrats and Republicans are remembering and honoring Congressman John Lewis after he died from cancer late Friday night. Lewis was a lion of the civil rights movement, and his bloody beating by Alabama state troopers in 1965 helped to galvanize opposition to racial segregation. In 2013, he talked about the civil rights movement and the progress made since then.
In 1963, we could not register to vote simply because of the color of our skin. We had to pay a poll tax, pass a so-called literacy test. 50 years later, we can ride anywhere we want to ride. We can stay where we want to stay. Those signs that said white and color are gone, and you won't see them anymore.
Though Lewis was a strong Democrat, he had friends on both sides of the aisle working with Republicans where he could. Both President Trump and Vice President Pence honored him, along with members of Congress. Coming up, a popular pastor has received a backlash for his warning to some Christians: don't get on the modern bandwagons of some cultural trends. We'll explain what that means and the backlash as well when we come back.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torresadillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike ROIZEN, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
A popular pastor is taking some heat for speaking out against what he's calling cultural hype trains. FaithWire.com's Dan Andros is here right now with more on this. Ed Young is pastor of Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas, and he says he has a warning for woke Christians. So what are woke Christians, and what was the warning?
Yeah, well, woke Christians, while he didn't really give a specific definition, typically refers to Christians who are hopping on the bandwagons of different social justice issues, these issues that become popular hashtags on Twitter and are identifying with a particular group or movement. And Christians are hopping onto these and kind of going along with the cultural and secular world view. So that would be just kind of a general quick definition of a woke Christian. And Pastor Young was warning about hopping on, as you mentioned, cultural hype trains. And he said that they're doing so without looking at specifically what these movements are tethered to. They're just going along with these hashtags, with the bumper sticker, so to speak, and going ahead and going along with it without really doing the research and looking at what is laying underneath and what is really driving these movements.
What are some of the cultural issues that he's concerned about?
Yeah, well, and as he mentioned, some of them are, relativism, transgenderism, abortion, ending the patriarchy and dismantling the nuclear family structure. These are some of the issues that you'll find if you go underneath the layers of some of these hashtags that are popular on Twitter. And a lot of times, as Pastor Young mentioned, they'll use these hashtags to sort of gain popularity because they're general statements that people agree with and generally that wouldn't disagree with. But it's sort of like a Trojan horse to bring in these other issues and sort of, pack this agenda, this usually a leftist agenda, and people, who have goodwill and mean to do well and mean to do well to their neighbor, a lot of times unwittingly are championing these other causes that, their faith would actually have them usually stand against.
He also addressed the difference between the sentiment Black Lives Matters versus the organization.
Yes, he did. And he actually started out and it was kind of he chuckled when he said, I'm probably going to get backlash for this. And he ended up being right. But he did start by saying, look, I support the phrase Black Lives Matter. But in addition, so in support of his point that these other issues come in, he said, you got to look at what the organization Black Lives Matter means. He said there's a difference there. He can support Black Lives Matter as a statement. He absolutely agreed with that. But then when you look at some of the things underneath that this group is pushing, which includes some of the aforementioned items, abortion, transgenderism, all these issues that mainline Christians are typically in opposition to, he said that those are the things that are lying beneath the surface and that we as Christians can't really adopt and have to stand up against.
How can Christians navigate showing love and care for people without getting caught up in the cultural mandates of the day?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and Pastor Young said that a lot of times fear is what is gripping people from engaging in these conversations. But he said he also said that we conflate acceptance and approval, and while we can accept people as Christians, we don't have to approve of their behavior. And so he listed a number of things, having gay friends, for example, and saying that he can accept them as friends and be with them and chat with them and have conversation with them. But that doesn't mean we have to approve of their behavior. And so he said that culture has conflated those two things. And so we have to walk carefully, understanding that that's the field that we're playing in right here. And so you got to be careful. But he always said to lead with kindness, and that is the key.
Dan Andrews with FaithWire.com. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to remind you folks at home that you can catch more of today's important spiritual issues on FaithWire. You can catch that this evening at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN.